Yes, my name is Asata Umoja, and I'm president of the Hyde Park Organizational Partnership for Empowerment, and I'd like to speak on all available items. I have a primary concern about item 76. You know, this is people keep saying it's a good start. It's actually no start at all. And people keep calling in saying that the people who are concerned about the homeless and that the way the homeless are treated are, you know, a small group of radicals. No, it's a huge majority of people that are concerned about how the homeless are being treated. It could be somebody in your family. We're dealing with people that have been locked out of their homes, some of them. Everybody that's out on the street is not a criminal. Some of the biggest criminals you're going to see are probably sitting in the city council. Some of the biggest criminals you're probably going to see are the ones that are walking around you every day and with suits on, talking about people exposing themselves. You can look every day and see who those people are. So we need to stop criminalizing the homeless. Yes, they have problems, but people who are not homeless also have problems. And we need to make sure that before you pass this amendment, that you this item, that you look at it very thoroughly, because it's a shame of a people who will fail to address the issue of homeless. Penalizing and victimizing the homeless will not solve this problem. You need to, before you do this, you really need to make sure that you look at what the real issues are and try to come up with some real solutions. I know people are concerned about their stores. I'm concerned about walking by people who might be of some harm too. But at the same time, there are people who are not homeless that could do some harm. Let's make sure that we look at what the core issue is in terms of addressing this issue rather than coming up with an amendment and saying that it's a good start. It's not a start at all. Go back to the drawing table, come up with something that's really going to help, especially people who are mentally deranged, and you know they are. And then the other thing is just in terms of, I want to look at item 70, where we're talking about multi-family affordability on Manchester. I'm looking at this item and I don't see anything about affordability. One of the main issues that we're having is housing that's being built that does not address family units. So if it's going to address family units, it needs to be affordable to the people who live in the community. It's being given a significant amount of tax credits and entitlements, and we need to make sure it's going to be something that actually works for the benefit of the community. And then we have, yes, on SB 678, the support for women, homeless women. I think that's a good thing. But I see that you held item 74. And I'm really concerned. I want to make sure I know when that's coming back up again, because you're talking about Destination Crenshaw, which is being called a community-inspired.
Miguel, candidate, sir, I'd like to speak on all items.
You have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
This motion is pure. I'm talking about 76 right now. This motion is pure criminalization, nothing more. The courts have already determined that you cannot outlaw living in public space when there's nowhere else to go. The meager shelter and temporary housing options that the city currently offers people have documented abusive prison-like conditions. Then you wonder why people are hesitant to move there. Just this week, the LA Times reported on the huge numbers of tenants who have died in Project LAMC due to neglectful conditions. You offer jail-like conditions if they do accept shelter, and actual jail if they don't. What kind of choice is that? This motion will do nothing but increase the interactions between unhoused people and police. We know what happens when the cops interact with poor, Black, and disabled people. People get arrested, people get hurt, people die. This is cruelty, nothing more. If this motion passes, what parts of the city are left for people to live until you come up with suitable and sufficient permanent housing? Have you seen the map? It's a hellish Swiss cheese of blocked off areas that no one will be able to navigate. There's no way someone will know if they are in a legal or illegal spot. They will be subject to criminal punishment for a law that they cannot possibly figure out how to follow. And for all the anti-poor bigots on the line who keep talking about children's safety, the children of our city should understand poverty. They should learn about racism and ableism. They should understand that what state violence is and how it's wrong. You should be teaching them about these things so that they can be better equipped to make this city better in the future. Sweeping visible poverty out of sight only punishes poor Black and brown people, queer people, and disabled people, while denying your children an opportunity to learn about empathy, compassion, and the dangers of neoliberal policy. Stop spreading your hatred of poor people to your children. Thank you.
The following, I think, is clear and is universally agreed upon. People should not be living in unregulated encampments in our parks. We agree on that. People should not be living outside or next to our children's schools. People shouldn't be living and lighting campfires in high fire areas or outside of people's homes. People shouldn't be living on sidewalks, blocking ADA access and making it necessary for people to walk in the street. Those are all places where people should not be living. So what's wrong with this ordinance today, and why am I voting against it? Because what we're doing today, even as improved, tells people who are unhoused and unsheltered and have no place to go where they cannot sleep, but it does not tell them where they can sleep. That's what it comes down to for me. Everything else aside, that's what it comes down to for me. Where can people go? Where can people sleep when they do not have an alternative? Yes, we have created more housing units and created more shelter beds and more interventions, tiny homes and cabins and everything else than ever before. We have more beds available than we have ever had. Against opposition and against protest, members of this council, almost every member of this council, has done more in a year or two than previous councils did in generations. Yes. And it has not been easy. We all know that. Hell, I haven't got just protests, I've got lawsuits and appeals that have tried to stop or slow down everything I've tried to do. But despite all that work, despite all that progress, we still do not have enough units or enough beds. We still do not have enough places for everybody to go who wants to go somewhere. We still cannot tell people who ask us, where can I go to sleep? We're tens of thousands of units away from that. I asked LASA this morning. We have enough beds in the city of Los Angeles to house 39% of our unsheltered population. What about the other 61%? Now, I know everyone around this horseshoe has stories to tell of somebody who has refused an offer of shelter. I do too. I believe that that is usually for deeper reasons than the rather facile explanation that they are service resistant, but that's a discussion for another day. Although I will note, this week in Venice, in an area that most people have determined to be or described as one of the most service-resistant homeless populations around, 64 people in 9 days have moved indoors. And I also note that there are some around the horseshoe who will say, justifiably, that they have provided a greater number of beds in their district than the number of unhoused people living in their district. Why can't they enforce? Well, as we all know, there are districts that have started with significantly smaller homeless populations than other districts. And citywide, we still do not have beds for the other 61%. And we are not the Los Angeles Confederation of Council Districts. We are the city of Los Angeles. I also know that everyone around the horseshoe has heard and has had evidence or experience with people on the streets who are disruptive or problematic. I have too. And I think an ordinance like this is clearly designed to try to get to that problem, and it's easy to center the conversation around that. That's the dominant image of homelessness in the public imagination. But no matter how many next door posts we read or how many Streets of Shame segments we see, that's not the reality of most people who are unhoused and unsheltered in Los Angeles. And it's times like this where I wish we had that commission on lived experience of people with homelessness, so people who know the impact of what we may do can sit at that table and look us all in the eye and tell us. Absent that, I'm going to share some of my lived experience. Most of you know, I think all of you know, I'm a recovering addict and alcoholic. I have not been shy about sharing that experience. What I don't share as openly or as frequently about is my experience being unhoused. And I say unhoused, I don't say homeless, because I think it draws a false parallel between my experience and today's experience on the streets. I didn't live in an encampment, but I literally had no place to live. For periods of time, I did not have, in my 20s in Los Angeles, a home. Most of the time, I was able to couch surf, or friends would give me a place to crash. Sometimes I could scratch together a few dollars and stay in a really gross motel. But then there are nights I did not have a place to go. Some of those nights, I slept in my car, and a few of those nights, when my car was in the shop, I slept on the beach. I can't tell you how much turmoil there is in your heart when the sun is setting and you don't know where you can sleep. I cannot describe how demoralizing and dehumanizing and defeating that experience is when you don't know where you're going to sleep. I can't adequately express the combination of shame and frustration and anger and desperation and confusion you feel in that moment. And that's why I keep asking again and again, where can people sleep? I said the other day, show me a map. Somebody told my staff, one of my staff members, well, Mike's asking for the impossible. It's impossible to make that map. Imagine how impossible that is for the person who doesn't know where they can sleep when we are short tens of thousands of beds. Imagine this day, you've lived in existence outdoors. People have refused to make eye contact with you all day long. That's a good day. Other days, people have shouted obscenities at you. Maybe you thought you were going to get housing, and your caseworker didn't show up. Or your cell phone wasn't charged, and so you couldn't make the right contact. Imagine you're sitting there all day, and you haven't showered, and your clothes are dirty. Your face is sunburned, and you are dead dog tired. You haven't had a moment to relax and to drop your guard and just to exhale. And then at the end of that day, you have to ask yourself, where can I sleep? Where can I be so inconspicuous that no one will yell at me? Where can I spend the night where I'm safe from an automatic sprinkler turning on in the middle of the night and soaking me and all of my belongings? Where can I be safe enough from assault that I can actually fall asleep and get deep sleep? Where can I be and stash my belongings so they're not stolen when I sleep? Where can I sleep that is quiet enough that I can actually get some rest? With this ordinance, we say where people can't sleep. And all of those are reasonable places to say people can't sleep. But we make those questions I just asked harder for that person to answer. We increase the uncertainty, and we increase the turmoil. We increase the self-hatred, and we worsen the situation. My lived experience teaches me that we are all fragile, that we are all breakable and often break, and that we all stumble and fall down, and that we often need somebody to help us up. I believe deep in my heart that every member of this body wants to help people up. I believe that firmly. But telling people where they cannot sit, sleep, or lie does not tell them or does not help them how to get back up. I know my no vote is unpopular. I've gotten calls from millionaires. I've gotten attacks from the police union. I've been vilified by unnamed trolls. I've been told, you're going to be responsible for death. I've been told, you really don't care about people living on the streets. I've been told, you don't have the political will to do what's right. I've been told this will be the end of your career. I've been told you will live to regret this. I've had people call me a faggot. I've had people say, I hope your family suffers. It sucks. We've all lived with that. Every single one of us. It's horrible. You know what? It's okay. Because today, when I go home, I know where I can sleep. I don't have that feeling of not knowing. When I go home tonight, no matter what else, I know where I can sleep. And everybody in Los Angeles deserves to know that. And until we can tell them that, I'm a no vote. Thank you.
I want to just say that there is sections of this ordinance that I completely agree with. I do support having restrictions on ADA, on sidewalk camping. We need our sidewalks passable for those walking, passing through the city in wheelchairs and pushing strollers. And in fact, those laws are actually on the books right now. They're just not enforced for some reason. I support restrictions on camping in and around sensitive sites like parks and schools. And I want to address real criminal activity, sites of criminal activity. These are questions that we must be talking about. But to figure out how to figure out where people can be, where people can and can't be homeless, we have to go through a deliberate process. This was not it. This was a quick and hasty process, and it was done behind closed doors. We have a homelessness and poverty committee so that we can get into the weeds on these issues. We have the assistance of city departments who could have consulted with us to lay out a plan for where these sites can be and should be, where people cannot camp. Our normal processes for making policy on difficult issues has been abandoned here. Members said on Tuesday that we've been discussing these issues for years. I've been here since December, and I sit on the Homelessness and Poverty Committee. And although this is something that my office has been discussing with people, how do we better regulate public space? How do we share it with one another? I have never participated in more than one conversation with my colleagues in an official setting about this issue, which was on Tuesday, right before being asked to vote on it. That to me is not a deliberative process. That's not a place where we can really make decisions about some of the most important questions confronting our city. And though I mentioned that I support certain aspects of this ordinance, I also have serious concerns. We are really focused on setting out rules for where people can be and can't be, without having a clear plan at all for how we're going to enforce those rules. The LA Times editorial this morning made that clear. We have in this ordinance the compliance part, but we do not have any of the compassion. This is what we were talking about on Tuesday over and over. We heard it from many of our colleagues, compliance and compassion together. That's not what we're voting on today. We're only voting on one piece of that. A year ago, we had tens of thousands of people marching in the streets. And we had a consensus, or so I thought, in this city, that we should not, in responding to this crisis of homelessness, be leading with police enforcement. But who will be enforcing this ordinance? Have we funded compliance-oriented outreach workers? Have we created a new unit or even laid plans for a new unit of unarmed non-police personnel who can work with people to enforce this ordinance? This is what we need in order to do this right, in order for this to look different from exactly what we've been doing in the past in Los Angeles, which has gotten us to this situation that we're in today. Finally, I also want to object to the framework that we're putting into place here with these resolutions, where council members bring resolutions to ban encampments, and really how are those resolutions going to come about? They're going to come about when people complain about them. And every overpass, every place that we get a complaint about, that will be the source of a resolution from an office. And this creates a district-by-district arms race, where people will get pushed around from district to district instead of having a citywide strategy that prioritizes intervention in encampments by need, by safety, by fire risk, by all of the things that we are claiming to be so concerned about. In the end, this will just push people around again. It's not going to solve homelessness or get anybody into housing.
Every idea, frankly, that comes before me is, frankly, as troubling as it is an opportunity. I will support this. I will do so. I will confess to everybody I will do so reluctantly, because we stand on very tenuous moral grounds. I'm reminded of the war on drugs, which is in our history now. At the beginning of the war on drugs, and Mr. Cedillo, you correct me if I'm wrong, liberals said, we need enforcement and we need treatment and we need opportunity. And so we got to do a little enforcement because we can't have people using drugs around schools, so we're going to pass the Drug-Free Communities Act. And then we can't have people using drugs in public housing, so we're going to pass a law against that. And then people keep using drugs and there's no consequences, Mr. Buscaino, so we're going to pass 3 strikes. And guess what happened? A third of black men in my generation spent decades in prison. And to this day, we talk here about we're going to provide housing. To this very day, you can't get drug treatment on demand in the United States. So the talk makes me nervous because you pass one restriction and then that's not going to work. What we're doing today is not going to clear all encampments. There are going to be more encampments, and people are going to complain about them the way they are now. And then it might be a different set of us, or it might be the same. There's going to be demand for another penalty or punishment. And then there's going to be a demand for another one, and another one, and another one. And I'm just not sure what our pathway to actually housing 61,000 people is. And frankly, it's not even 61,000, because by the time we do that, this economy is creating homeless people faster than we can build houses. When we started and I came into council, I ran for council, wasn't even interested in homelessness. And council president put me in charge of the Homelessness and Poverty Committee, and we did HHH. There were 11,000 homeless people. We said we're going to build 10,000 units of housing. I said, great, I can move on and we can work on some other things that I care about. Well, guess what? We're at 61,000 now. So even if we had accomplished that task in 6 months, we'd still be 50,000 short. And so, again, I said I was reluctant to speak because this problem at this moment feels hopeless, and it feels like a challenge that we have yet to come up with the intellect, ingenuity, and creativity to solve. But again, I just want to put a point of sobriety on all of it. It's real easy to throw all these people back in prison, because frankly, that's where they were 20 years ago. It's no coincidence that the largest racial group among homeless people is black people. It's no coincidence that the largest group among homeless people are people who are descendants of slaves, who, by the way, you probably could have solved a lot of this if you just paid slaves back decades ago, which we also didn't figure out and haven't figured out. We just now, in 2021, have a committee on reparations in the liberal city of Los Angeles, just now. So, again, I rise to thank everybody who's had the courage and the discipline to work on this, even though it's very, very difficult. I want to thank folks who've been supportive and expressed support for the motion I put forward that says, we know we have a historical problem with enforcement on everything. So those consequences, we don't have a history of applying consequences equally. And so we want to make sure that on a monthly basis we get a report that does that. And again, also, you know, 76B, when I read 76B, Mr. Lee and Mr. Buscaino, you know what that says to me? If I'm at a picnic and I'm eating and I fall asleep, somebody can call the police on me. That's what that says. But that's what the law says. Some of us have to think about that. It's the reality. So, again, I will cast an aye vote. I will do so reluctantly, and I invite all of my colleagues to remain sober on this issue, remain vigilant on this issue. It's our responsibility to solve. We haven't been given a lot of good tools to do so, frankly. But again, we cannot shrink from the responsibility, and that's why I'll cast an aye vote today. Thank you.